Do you think she even understands a word we're saying?" Cole didn't bother to lower his voice, his smirk cutting across the polished walnut table. Marvin chuckled, swirling his bourbon. "Probably not, but $1 billion acquisition for a silent French heiress? I'll take that any day." That's how it began. Welcome to TrueLine Tales. Please subscribe and leave a like for us. It means the world to us. Also, share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and enjoy as we dive into the story. The rooftop restaurant overlooked the Atlanta skyline, sunlight glinting off glass towers and the reflective surface of the river. Strings of warm lights zigzagged above the terrace, blending with the city's evening hum. This wasn't just a dinner. It was a stage for wealth, power, and status. At the head of the table sat Elodie Du Bois, founder of Novature AI, her French elegant apparent in every gesture. She had not spoken a single word of English all evening, not because she couldn't, but because she wouldn't. Her translator, seated discreetly behind her, only repeated the brief business responses she allowed. Every nod, every glance was calculated, a subtle exercise in control. And there was Jada Freeman, nearly invisible but always watching. A young black waitress with an athletic grace and sharp almond eyes. She moved between tables, topping up glasses and clearing plates. But she was absorbing every insult, every condescending smile, every dismissive comment made about Elodie's silence or her exotic presence. And when Elodie whispered something softly in French, her private frustrations, observations, Jada understood every word, though the men remained oblivious. Cole and Marvin, confident in their dominance, hadn't realized that the quiet ones, the ones they assumed invisible, were watching. The first toast was awkward. Cole raised his glass of bourbon. "To partnerships that know no boundaries," he said, voice smooth, confident. Elodie lifted her glass and sipped, whispering something in French that went UN translated. The men shifted, uneasy. Marvin muttered, "Are we negotiating with a statue?" Cole forced a polite smile. Cultural. Patience. Marvin's patience ran thin. He snapped his fingers at Jada without looking at her. "Sweetheart, top up the wine. Quick." Jada's hands were steady, her face calm. Inside, a storm raged. She poured, eyes never leaving Elodie, whose calm composure made the men twitch. The conversation turned to numbers, projections, and market capture, each French response precise, measured, and infuriatingly polite. Then came the final condescension. Silent, decorative, probably just a pretty face, Marvin whispered to Cole. Jada's chest tightened. Elodie's eyes, though unreadable, carried a flicker of recognition. Someone here did see her. Jada felt it too. A spark ignited, a quiet rebellion. She had been trained to disappear, to stay silent, to serve without being seen. But tonight, something inside her stirred. Beneath chandeliers in the golden Atlanta sunset, tension thickened. The men assumed silence meant weakness, but the quiet women at the table were preparing their own moves. And as the night deepened, the first cracks in the men's carefully built arrogance began to show. The rooftop, the city lights, and the quiet strength of two underestimated women. It all promised a night that will be remembered. The night air on the rooftop terrace had grown cooler, carrying the hum of traffic and the distant pulse of the city. Jada Freeman moved silently between tables, wine bottle in hand, her eyes never leaving Elodie Du Bois. Every gesture from the French heiress was precise, graceful, controlled. She had not understood a single word of English all evening, not because she couldn't, but because she chose to rely on her translator. Only the brief, formal replies she allowed were spoken aloud. Cole leaned back, watching Elodie with smug confidence. She's quiet, too quiet. I can't tell if she's impressed or just playing dumb. Marvin laughed softly, swirling his glass. Playing dumb? With that dress, that hair, that look? She's a silent weapon. But we're still in control here. Let's not forget, she needs us more than we need her. Jada's fingers tightened around the bottle. Needs you? She muttered under her breath, though no one heard. She had absorbed every whispered slight aimed at Elodie, every condescending glance, every dismissive comment. And she had also understood Elodie's private murmurs in French. Do they think they can erase me so easily? Cole and Marvin were oblivious. They sipped, smiled, and made notes, confident the French heiress was no threat. But every subtle movement from LRD was being processed by someone they never noticed. The first course arrived, roasted duck with a delicate orange glaze, paired with a crisp Chardonnay. The fragrance was intoxicating, yet the atmosphere was thick with tension. Jada refilled glasses with meticulous care, the click of her heels on the hardwood floor echoing slightly in the private room. Marvin leaned toward Cole. Honestly, we could probably replace her with some automated AI translator. Would save time and keep things interactive. Jada froze for a second, but LRD's eyes didn't miss it. Calm, unreadable, she tilted her head slightly, sending a silent warning. Her translator stayed mute, as instructed, but Jada's pulse quickened. She knew LRD had just marked that comment, filed it for later. Cole tapped his fingers against the table, trying to regain control. We've got the projections, the patents, the technology. This should be smooth. I don't see why she's resisting. It's just business. LRD leaned slightly toward her translator, speaking only the words you wanted translated. We will review your proposal carefully. Neutral, polite, and deliberately limited. What the men didn't hear, what Jada alone understood, was the private frustration and calculation behind the words. Jada's mind raced. Every tiny slip, every underestimation, added fuel. She had been invisible her whole life, trained to serve, to disappear. But tonight, she saw an opportunity to act, to protect, to witness justice in motion. The tension built like a drumbeat. Cole smiled too widely. Marvin rolled his eyes. Neither noticed the quiet storm brewing. Jada moved past their sightlines, refilling glasses with calm precision. Her eyes locked on LRD once again, silently sharing understanding. They think we are powerless. They are about to learn differently. The first battle lines had been drawn. But Jada knew the real war, the one that would redefine everything, was only just beginning. The city lights of Atlanta glittered like shards of glass below the rooftop terrace. But inside the private dining room, the atmosphere was tense, suffocating. Jada Freeman moved between tables with quiet, controlled precision, her steps deliberate and balanced, every movement sharp and fluid, the kind of grace that came from years of athletic training. Her eyes never left Elodie Dubois. Every gesture from the French heiress was deliberate, precise, controlled, a queen observing her court. Cole leaned forward, tapping his pen on the table. Honestly, I don't get it. She's not saying much, but she's costing us time. What's the deal? Marvin chuckled, swirling his bourbon. Maybe silence is her power. I mean, come on. We've got the numbers, the patents, the tech. This should be easy. Jada's hand froze for a moment. Easy? She thought. They are blind to everything happening in this room. Elodie whispered something in French, just audible enough for Jada to catch. Do they really think money erases vision? The translator repeated only the formal response. We will consider your offer. Cole smirked. Consider? That's a polite no. Or maybe a yes. Marvin laughed. Either way, she's silent. We control the floor. Let's move on. Jada's pulse quickened. She had watched every subtle microaggression, every glance that dismissed Elodie's presence. The men assumed Elodie's silence meant weakness, but Jada knew better. She had understood every private French remark, every carefully concealed emotion. Elodie was building a mental map of their arrogance, their impatience, their blind assumptions. The first appetizer arrived, seared scallops with a delicate saffron sauce. The aroma of butter and citrus filled the room, but the tension overpowered the fragrance. Jada moved closer to Elodie, discreetly refilling her water. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. Jada understood. Watch carefully. Patience is power. Cole leaned over toward Marvin, lowering his voice. She's barely interacting. I mean, seriously, are we negotiating with a mannequin? Elodie's silver eyes flicked toward them, unreadable. The translator remained silent. Jada's stomach tightened. That private murmur in French reached her ears. They underestimate every second. Let them. Marvin shook his head. I don't get it. Why so formal? Why the mystery? Jada moved around the table, keeping her distance, but listening closely. Every word, every gesture from the men, every smirk aimed at Elodie was being noted by someone they couldn't see. The first crack in their confidence had begun. Elodie finally leaned slightly forward, giving a single measured instruction through a translator. Please review the revised terms carefully. Neutral, polite, but deliberate. What the men didn't hear, what only Jada understood, was a calculated warning behind those words. She knew exactly how they were trying to manipulate her, and she was already preparing to respond. Jada straightened her posture, her mind racing. She had always been trained to vanish, to serve, to be invisible. But tonight, she was learning that her presence and her understanding was a weapon. The quietest observers often held the most power. Cole and Marvin continued their smug commentary, unaware that the room was shifting beneath them. Every careless word, every underestimated glance was being recorded, not by a device, but in the mind of someone they had ignored. The first skirmish had begun, subtle and unseen, but the real confrontation, the one that would flip the room, was only a heartbeat away. The private dining room felt heavier tonight, the kind of weight that presses against your chest even when you try to breathe normally. Jada Freeman moved among the guests with the fluid precision of an athlete, adjusting wine glasses, refilling water, ensuring nothing appeared out of place. Her eyes, however, never left the table. Elodie Dubois sat at the head of the polished oak table, silent, regal, letting her translator handle the men's words. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her silver hair caught the soft amber light, and her dark indigo dress fell like still water over her frame. The room was meant to impress. Crystal chandeliers, gleaming marble floors, a city skyline stretching far beyond. But the men's arrogance overshadowed even the grandeur. Cole leaned back, swirling bourbon in his glass. Honestly, Marvin, she barely reacts. I don't know why we're wasting time. Let's just push through the numbers. Marvin smirked, not looking up. Silence doesn't mean strength. It's just blank. We fill it with our own words. She can't argue. Jada's jaw tightened. Silence could be powerful. She knew that, but arrogance like theirs, that could be exploited. Every dismissive smake, every condescending gesture, every flick of their fingers of the translator was catalogued in her mind. She saw it all. The first course arrived, roasted duck with honey glaze. Jada adjusted Elodie's plate subtly, making sure nothing distracted the heiress, then moved toward Cole and Marvin with perfect neutrality. She caught the small signs of impatience, Cole drumming his fingers, Marvin rolling his eyes. They were too comfortable, too confident. Cole chuckled, leaning toward Marvin. I mean, she's practically a statue. Maybe we should just call it a day. Elodie whispered softly to her translator in French. Observe carefully. They overestimate themselves. The translator relayed only a polite, neutral response to the men, who nodded smugly, oblivious. Jada's eyes flicked between them all. She understood every word of Elodie's French, storing it carefully. She noted the arrogance, the entitlement, the assumption that Elodie was powerless. Her chest tightened, not with fear, but with determination. Marvin waved his hand at Jada, not even looking at her. Sweetheart, more wine here. The word stung, loaded with unknown familiarity. Jada poured steadily, silently, letting her hands do the work while her mind raced. She saw the subtle shift in Elodie's eyes, the tiniest recognition that someone else in the room noticed the disrespect. Cole leaned back, smiling confidently. Honestly, she's polite, but predictable. Nothing we can't handle. But Jada noticed. Every twitch, every flinch, every unspoken insult was being registered. By Elodie, by herself. The tension in the room thickened. The men thought they were steering the conversation. They didn't see the quiet storm building, just beyond the surface. Jada's athletic grace made her invisible, yet her presence carried weight. Each silent observation, each small adjustment, were preparing the room for the moment when the balance would tip, and she knew it was coming. The table continued its dance of polite exchanges, polite nods, and polite underestimation. But beneath the surface, a reckoning was stirring. The men thought they were winning. They had no idea what was about to happen. The tension in the room had become almost tangible. Cole and Marvin laughed too loudly, their words cutting through the air like knives. We could probably replace her with a translator app, Marvin said, smirking. Would get more interaction than the Heiress here. Elodie's silver eyes remained calm, unreadable. She said nothing aloud, letting her translator continue delivering measured, neutral responses. But Jada Freeman's gaze caught the slight narrowing of Elodie's eyes, the almost imperceptible stiffening of her posture. She understood. Jada had been silent this entire evening, observing, cataloging, absorbing. But she had also been learning. She knew every nuance, every microaggression, every condescending word. And tonight, the quiet had reached its breaking point. Cole leaned back, swirling his bourbon, grinning at Marvin. Seriously, are we negotiating a business deal performing for Mannequin? Jada moved closer to Elodie under pretense of checking the silverware. In a voice low and steady, just for Elodie to hear, she whispered in French, "They assume ignorance. They are wrong." Elodie's lips curved slightly, almost imperceptibly. That small acknowledgement was all the signal Jada needed. With her heart pounding but her movements deliberate, Jada stepped forward. The men's laughter continued. Unaware that the room had already shifted, she approached Elodie's side, bowing, not a shallow gesture of service, but a deep, formal bow of respect, the kind learned from years of discipline and cultural understanding. Then Jada spoke, fluent French rolling off her tongue, crisp and commanding. "Madame Du Bois, I must intervene. Their words, their tone, their assumptions, they are not what you deserve. If you allow me, I will ensure they understand the full weight of their actions." The room froze. Cole's smirk faltered. Marvin's fingers stopped drumming against the table. Even the translator blinked, caught off guard. Elodie's eyes softened, the first real recognition of allyship passing between them. "Miss Freeman," the translator asked, hesitant. "Yes," Jada replied, voice steady, cutting through pretense of politeness. "From now on, I will translate Madame Du Bois' responses directly. She is not silent. She is being underestimated, and that ends tonight." The effect was immediate. Cole opened his mouth, but no words came. Marvin leaned forward, uneasy, realizing for the first time that their assumed control had been challenged. Elodie's posture shifted subtly, no longer defensive, but strategic. Jada picked up the contract folder left carelessly on the table. Her eyes scanned each line, each clause, exposing the subtle manipulations the men had inserted. When she read aloud, translating Elodie's measured French, the arrogance drained from Cole and Marvin's faces. Their confident dominance crumbled under the weight of scrutiny, and the room, once theirs, belonged to Elodie and Jada. Silence fell, charged but no longer tense. Elodie's hand rested briefly on Jada's arm, a quiet acknowledgement. The message was clear. They had been seen. Their arrogance had been measured. And now it would be reckoned with. For the first time that evening, the private dining room no longer belonged to Cole and Marvin. It belonged to the women they had underestimated, and to the courage of a quiet observer who had finally broken the silence. The air in the private dining room was heavy, but it no longer belonged to Cole and Marvin. The men, once brimming with arrogance, sat frozen, unsure of how to respond. Every glance between Elodie Du Bois and Jada Freeman was a silent assertion. The quiet ones had taken control. Jada adjusted the contract folder on the polished table, her hands steady, her voice calm as she translated Elodie's precise French. Section 7B is not a suggestion. It protects Madame Du Bois' intellectual property. You will not manipulate it post-merger. Cole's hand twitched toward his bourbon glass, but the word stuck in his throat. Marvin leaned forward, trying to mask his panic with a forced chuckle. This is ridiculous. Who are you to? Watch closely, Jada said softly, not raising her voice, but firm enough for them to feel it. Madame Du Bois has been underestimated. That stops tonight. The men's smug facade began to crack. The translator, who had handled Elodie's words all evening, looked to Jada with newfound respect. Every carefully measured French sentence now carried weight. The room shifted. What had been polite business banter now felt like a reckoning. Elodie leaned back, serene, allowing Jada to handle the confrontation. It wasn't a lack of power. It was strategy. Cole and Marvin were realizing, slowly, that their usual tactics, condescension, charm, overconfidence, no longer applied. Perhaps a recap? Jada continued, translating Elodie's French, her words slicing through pretense. The revised contract protect her team, her technology, and her legacy. Any attempt to undermine these will be immediately reported. Fraud is not a suggestion, it is a crime. Marvin's smile faltered. Cole's jaw tightened. The room felt smaller, the luxurious chandeliers and marble floors no longer shields, but mirrors reflecting their overreach. Jada glanced at Elodie. The subtle nod in return was all the affirmation she needed. They were aligned. Together, they were unstoppable. The final insult had come early in the evening, Cole comparing Elodie to a decorative statue. But Jada's intervention had flipped the narrative. Suddenly, the heiress was seen, heard, and understood. And the men? Their superiority complex was evaporating under the quiet, undeniable force of truth. Jada took a deep breath, her athletic grace keeping her movements fluid and unassuming. She didn't need to shout. Her presence, combined with Elodie's silent power, spoke louder than any words could. From now on, Jada translated, all communications will be direct, transparent, and with respect. Madame Dubois does not tolerate deception or manipulation. Cole opened his mouth again, but Elodie's eyes, sharp and unwavering, stopped him. The weight of her calm authority rendered him mute. Marvin shifted in his seat, uncomfortable. The balance had shifted completely. In the background, Jada felt a surge of vindication. Years of being overlooked, underestimated, and dismissed had led to this moment. She wasn't just a server in a room full of power. She was a force that ensured power was recognized and respected. The men had entered the room expecting to dominate, to negotiate on their terms. They had been wrong. The quiet ones, the women they ignored, dismissed, and underestimated, had rewritten the rules. And now, the next steps of the merger would be on Elodie's terms, with Jada as a bridge between worlds, languages, and cultures. The first major battle had been won, but the war, corporate, cultural, and personal, was just beginning, and both women were ready. The room was quiet, but it was no longer tense. It was charged. Cole and Marvin, who had entered the dinner with arrogance and entitlement, now sat frozen, realizing for the first time that they had been completely misjudged. The energy that had once belonged solely to them had shifted. Jada Freeman stood slightly behind Elodie Dubois, her athletic grace unmistakable as she moved with purpose. Every small gesture was deliberate, measured, and full of authority. She hadn't just observed the night's condescensions. She had catalogued every smake, every belittling tone, every microaggression. And now, with Elodie at her side, she was no longer invisible. Cole leaned forward, attempting to reclaim control. "Let's not forget, this is still a negotiation," he said, voice sharp but wavering. Elodie's silver eyes met his calmly, unwavering. She didn't flinch, didn't raise her voice. She simply allowed the translator to convey her measured, deliberate words. "You assumed silence meant weakness. You assumed disregard meant invisibility. You were wrong." Marvin shifted uncomfortably in his chair, fingers drumming nervously against the table. The laughter and condescension that had dominated earlier were gone, replaced by a cold awareness. The women they underestimated were now in command. Jada stepped closer, translating directly this time, not as a server, but as an advocate, a force. Elodie is not here to be toyed with, belittled, or underestimated. You cannot ignore her presence, her experience, or her insight. The words landed like a wave. Cole's confident smirk faltered. Marvin's grin disappeared entirely. Every tactic of intimidation, every subtle dig, had been neutralized by the clarity and courage of the two women in the room. Elodie reached out briefly, touching Jada's arm, a quiet, deliberate acknowledgement. It was more than thanks, it was recognition. In that gesture, the entire room felt a shift. The men, so used to controlling narratives, could only watch as their assumed dominance evaporated. From now on, Jada continued, voice firm, unwavering, all interactions will be conducted with respect. Underestimation is no longer an option. Cole opened his mouth, but words failed him. Marvin leaned back, clearly unsettled. The room's luxury, the polished wood, The chandeliers, the sweeping city views, no longer master reality. Power had changed hands, silently, decisively, and irrevocably. The first real acknowledgement came not from Elodie, but from a voice outside the room. A tall, sharply dressed African-American man stepped forward, an investor and ally. Jada Freeman acted with courage. Elodie Dubois has been disrespected, but no longer. They underestimated you, he said, addressing Jada. And now, everyone sees who hold the real power here. Jada's chest swelled, not with pride, but with resolve. This wasn't about reward. This was about visibility, justice, and the undeniable truth that silence did not equal submission. Elodie's eyes softened as they met Jada's. They had fought the same battle, in parallel, and now victory was mutual. Cole and Marvin could only sit in stunned silence, their arrogance dismantled by the quiet force of two women who refused to be erased. The room, once theirs, now belonged to Elodie and Jada. And in that silence, finally, recognition was complete. This isn't just a story about one encounter. It's about the quiet power in people who are underestimated, overlooked, or dismissed. If tonight's episode reminded you that strength comes in many forms, share it. Let someone else be inspired by what they might have ignored. And for more stories that shine a light on courage, resilience, and the unseen, subscribe and turn on notifications. The next story might change the way you see the world.